But it's also true that that kind of unbundling of the article form and the ease of publishing and distribution through the format of the web is a welcome change from a cultural perspective. Clay Shirky put it quite well in the context of what mass blogging means to publishing. We want a world where global publishing is effortless. We want a world where you don't have to ask permission or help to write out loud. Newspapers continue to face challenges of both form and format, but that's not always the case, at least not as dramatically. There can be substantial changes in format without too much changing about the underlying form itself. As consumption habits change, formats evolve to better meet demand for forms. The Apple iBook store is still a bookstore. It's still a place where people find and buy things that are in book form, even if behind it there's powerful shifts happening to the format, pricing, delivery mechanism, supply chain, and geographic boundaries of the market, just as a few examples. A recent blog post from Evan Schnittman illustrates the point nicely, showing how, at least in his case, there's no change at all in interest or demand for the form of the book, but there's significant changes happening to the format of a printed copy sold in a retail store. And here's some evidence of that format shift for our own sales. Here's data comparing this year's overall sales to last year's for ebooks and for a major print retailer. Ebooks now outsell print books on O'Reilly.com by 10 to 1. Though I should also point out that the strong ebook sales you see on the right are accompanying a lift in direct print sales to their highest levels in years. There is still demand for many of our books, even though the format, digital, sold direct, priced lower, and offered with updates and multiple download options, has changed quite a bit. So how do we make sense of the changes happening in terms of both form and format? There are nearly as many ways of talking about strategy as there are strategies. But one of my favorites is Michael Porter's 5 forces model. It's a way of looking at various internal and external pressures a business or industry faces. And in the context of form versus format, format shifts seem largely the result of changes to relationships on the left side of the model, while form shifts seem to generate more changes on the right side, though of course there is a lot of overlap. Going back to newspapers for just a moment. Newspaper customers have always been advertisers, and their suppliers are actually us, the readers, supplying newspapers with our attention, which they then resell at a markup to advertisers. The web removed the local monopoly that many newspapers had on those forms of information they packaged together, meaning they suddenly needed to compete for that limited supply of attention. As the amount of attention they were able to attract declined, their customers, the advertisers, gained leverage. At the same time, both suppliers and customers migrated quickly to new entrants and substitute products. So how exactly are these forces affecting us as book publishers? Ron Martinez also pointed me recently to a fabulous blog post from Ian Rogers, who used to run Yahoo Music, talking about the music industry. And in his post, taken from a talk given at an industry conference, Ian describes what he calls the physics of media. And it's these physics that seem to be largely driving the format shifts we're seeing in book publishing and across media industries. You can see those physics at work with the recent bankruptcy of the US video rental chain Blockbuster. But it's important to note that changes to the format in which movies and TV shows are sold, rented, delivered, and consumed don't necessarily mean there's any less demand for the form of the movie itself. Even as Blockbuster collapses, Netflix has adapted and responded to those changes and provided new formats for discovery, delivery, and consumption of the same product form that Blockbuster's model and structure could not sustain. For example, Netflix has made discovery more personal and delivery more convenient, successfully meeting the demand for the form of the movie in a more effective and efficient format. Netflix customers are consuming the same form of media that Blockbuster sells, but they're doing it in formats, digital, streaming, mobile, that Blockbuster was unable to adapt to. But even when new forms of content emerge and grow, they usually don't mean the demise of the old forms. In fact, if carefully managed, older forms can find new audiences as new distribution and delivery options evolve. For example, the multiplayer board game is a form that would appear to be under significant pressure from new forms of games, especially games that can be played anywhere and are often much less expensive than those board games. This is the hottest game on the iPhone right now, and it really is a fantastically fun game. It takes full advantage of the touch interface of the iPhone as players use their finger to fling birds at pigs using a slingshot. And clearly, there is very, very strong demand for this new form of mobile touch interface game, especially those made for casual gamers just killing time. These kinds of numbers are a big reason there's currently such a rush to develop mobile apps. But there's also opportunity lurking here for the older form of the multiplayer board game. Gaming company Hasbro has been relentless in bringing Scrabble to mobile devices and mobile gaming markets. And while, as you can see here from the Facebook integration and game options, that they've taken full advantage of the capabilities of this new delivery format, the game itself remains a form that is instantly recognizable to anyone who's played the board game. But even though the form remains, they've taken full advantage of the social and network connectivity and context of new formats like Facebook. And of course, there's an Android version and one for BlackBerry. And recently, they became the first paid app for Kindle. And the adaptation happening extends well beyond just traditional games. Here's just a few of the apps that I have on my iPad that integrate product and service forms available through traditional distribution and sales channels into the emerging mobile format. So if much of the challenge right now is adjusting to format changes, and that's a big challenge, one that can mean significant restructuring of both organizations and the business models they're built on, where do new forms come in when it comes to publishing? There are many types of books that are under serious pressure from new forms of content, such as mobile apps. One example is field guides for bird watchers. New mobile apps like these are much, much more effective at doing the job that bird watchers used to hire printed field guides to do. The same is true of telephone books, dictionaries, and in our own case, many of our programming reference books. Many of those books share something in common in that they are essentially printouts of a database. Not surprisingly, it's difficult for a printout of a database to compete with the real thing when it's possible to carry it around in your pocket. Unfortunately, it's difficult to predict which types of a particular form will be most displaced by new forms. I would certainly be nervous if I published crossword puzzle books, for example.